Publius Quintilius Varus kneels beneath the ancient trees of the Teutoburg Forest, the map spread out before him. Every line on it lies to him now. He can hear the forest breathing with the slow creak of wood and the low hum of voices that aren't his men. He was meant to bring Rome to the frontier. Instead, the frontier has swallowed Rome whole. Heartbroken by betrayal and the ruin of his legions, Varus knows what he has to do to preserve his honour here among the silent trees that have already begun to reclaim the fallen. 2,000 years later, the Teutoburg Forest hasn't forgotten. For centuries, people have said the sounds in the forest aren't always natural. Locals speak of distant voices, the faint clatter of armour, the echo of Latin commands drifting through the mist. Some even claim to have seen ranks of Roman soldiers marching between the trees. So what are people actually hearing and seeing in this forest? And why do the stories always lead back to the same stretch of trees? Come with me as we explore the extraordinary battle that destroyed Rome, the archaeology and the legends to find out. If the sight of Roman legions in a dark, wet forest feels familiar, it's probably because you've seen something like it before. The opening of Gladiator captured this kind of place perfectly. The cold, the mud, the claustrophobia of the trees closing in. But this story isn't Germania under Marcus Aurelius. This is the Teutoburg Forest almost 2 centuries earlier, and here Rome didn't triumph, it disappeared. The Teutoburg Forest is a low mountain range in northwestern Germany. Over the years, hikers, museum staff, and forest workers have passed around quiet ghost encounters and strange happenings. At the Wrocław Museum near Kalkriese, visitors report pale, torch-like lights moving across the fields after dark. These glows that seem to march, then fade into the mist. Staff usually attribute them to distant vehicles or farm lamps, yet the stories continue. Groups like Connect Paranormal's European Battlefield project have collected accounts from visitors who believe the lights trace the path of a long-vanished legion. Around the Hermannsdenkmal monument near Detmold, some hikers have reported seeing misty human shapes or hearing faint metallic sounds from nowhere at all. Even the Osning Hills further south have their legends. Forestry workers here have spoken of deep, horn-like notes drifting through the woods on still evenings. These are sounds that they've compared to Roman war horns echoing across the valley. So let's look at the events that left such a scar on this forest. The year is 9 AD, and this place will become known as the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. It was a disaster that crushed 3 Roman legions and ended Rome's dream of conquering Germania. For the 17th, 18th, and the 19th legions who marched into these woods, it began as an ordinary movement of troops, a routine operation through territory they believed was loyal, but the loyalty was an illusion. By the second day, the forest had closed around them. What began as a march had become a desperate struggle to stay upright. Rain poured in heavy sheets, turning the ground to black, sucking mud. Trees crowded so close that sound itself seemed to vanish. The Roman line stretched for miles with cavalry, baggage wagons, and exhausted infantry slipping beneath the weight of sodden armour. Then the arrows began. They came from everywhere at once. Spears followed, low and fast, from behind the trees. The forest itself seemed as though it was attacking, and so was the weather. Ancient accounts speak of violent rain and wind tearing through the ranks, soaking shields, blinding archers, and turning the paths to rivers of mud. The storm made the forest itself into a weapon. Commanders tried to rally the men, but orders were lost in the roar of wind and panic. The tight formations that had carried Rome across continents broke apart among the trees. Horses stumbled and fell. Carts overturned, and men vanished into the thickets before anyone could call their names. Every step forward only led them deeper into confusion. The legions had become a moving target. It was a column stretched too thin, too slow, and surrounded on all sides. And then came the realization that chilled every survivor. The man who'd promised them safe passage through the forest was the one who'd led them into the trap. Arminius, who had once served under Varus, knew exactly how the legions would react under such pressures. He was a Germanic prince of the Cherusci tribe, but as a young man, Arminius was taken to Rome as a hostage. This was part of the common Roman practice of educating the sons of allied or subject chieftains to secure their loyalty. He served in the Roman army, earned citizenship, and even held the rank of equestrian officer. Rome, and more importantly, the general and governor Varus, had trained him, trusted him, and celebrated him as proof that the frontier could be civilized. But Arminius had learned more than tactics. He learned how Rome thought, how it conquered, and where it was vulnerable. To Varus, he was a loyal ally. To his people, he became the spark of rebellion. He wasn't just Varus's enemy, he was his reflection, both proud, both loyal to what they believed in, both certain they were right. And it was that certainty that destroyed them both. Arminius used every lesson Rome had taught him: discipline, patience, deception, and turned them back against his teacher. Rome had trained for open battle with lines, maneuvers, and precision. The Germans fought using guerrilla tactics, but with a kind of battlefield intelligence Rome hadn't expected. For once, the Cherusci, Bructerian, Marsi tribes fought together under Arminius, a rare moment of unity that Rome never saw coming. Archaeological evidence shows that the Germanic warriors built an earthen rampart and timber palisade at a narrow point between the Wiener hills and the Great Moor. It funneled the Roman columns straight into a killing ground. It was a trap designed with chilling precision. This wasn't chaos, this was engineering. Some later Roman sources mention a tribe called the Harii, said to paint their bodies black and fight only at night, their shields darkened to blend into the trees. Tacitus described them as a people who heightened their innate savagery by art and timing. Now, we don't know for sure that they were there that day, but it certainly fits the story too well to ignore. Some historians think that the legend of the Teutoburg Forest ghosts may not have begun with the dead Romans themselves, but with the living warriors who terrified them. To soldiers trapped in the rain and darkness, those painted figures would have looked less like men and more like shadows, ghost warriors in every sense of the word. For 3 long days, the forest rang with steel, rain, and panic. By the 3rd day, the legions were no longer an army, just broken men running for light that never came. Of the roughly 20,000 soldiers who entered the forest, almost all were killed. Less than a few hundred are thought to have escaped. It was one of the worst defeats in Rome's history. Among the dead were not just soldiers, but camp followers, traders, and families. These were ordinary civilians who had marched with the legions and were slaughtered or enslaved. And perhaps that's why the forest still echoes. The battle was fought in darkness, in mud, and in a kind of fear that doesn't fade easily. 6 years later, after the battle, Rome came back. Not to reclaim the land so much, but to understand what had happened here. The man who led them was Germanicus, the adopted son of Emperor Tiberius. He was young, ambitious, and determined to restore Rome's honour. Tacitus writes that the bones of the legions still lay scattered across the ground, whitening under the rain. Broken helmets, skulls nailed to trees, and altars where survivors had even been sacrificed. Germanicus ordered the remains to be buried. Soldiers who helped with the burial were said to be so shaken by what they saw. They claimed they could still hear faint cries or the rings of arms when the wind shifted. Arminius didn't live to see peace. In 21 AD, he was assassinated by rival German nobles, an ironic end for the man who united them once and tore Rome apart. As for Varus, his name became a warning in Rome. Whenever legions were sent into danger, commanders were sent to whisper, "Varus, give me back my legions." Even Emperor Augustus was said to have cried it in his sleep. Now, interestingly, for centuries, no one knew exactly where it had happened. Ancient writers described the battle but never really said where. Then, in the late 1980s, a British soldier turned amateur archaeologist named Tony Clun began finding Roman coins near a low grassy hill at Calcresa. The pattern was strange, with dozens of coins, all minted under Varus himself. Excavations followed and the ground began to speak. Archaeologists uncovered spearheads and shattered helmets, fragments of armour fittings. They found human bones mixed with horse remains and a corroded bronze face mask from a Roman cavalryman, its hollow eyes still staring through 2,000 years of soil. Among the discoveries was something extraordinary, the most complete set of Roman segmented armour ever found. Piece by piece, it was painstakingly lifted from the mud, the iron plates still joined in places after 2 millennia. It offered a glimpse of what the legionary had looked like in his final moments, frozen at the edge of Rome's lost frontier. Everything pointed to what many now see as a clear conclusion. This is where the legions had died. Except even here, nothing is completely certain. Some researchers now argue that Calcresa might represent only part of the battle, or perhaps another clash entirely. By the 19th century, Arminius had been reborn as Hermann, a patriotic symbol of German unity. Hermann's Denkmal monument, completed in 1875, turned this ancient ambush into national myth. Today, the Verurschlat Museum stands at Calcresa, the strongest candidate for the battlefield. Its walkways thread through the same damp, silent fields where they marched. 2,000 years on, their story has never really stopped moving. And as an interesting side note, a fellow Australian was caught up in its violence too. Lieutenant Ralph Elliott of the Manchester Regiment was severely wounded here during the final days of the Second World War. He survived and went on to become a respected scholar, but it's strange to think of him lying wounded in the same forest that once swallowed Rome. History leaves marks. Some are written, some are buried, and some maybe are still heard. I'd love to hear what you think of this extraordinary battle and its lasting effect it had on Rome, so leave me a comment below. And if you've enjoyed this journey into Rome's most haunted defeat, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I'll see you next time.